Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. My name is Derek. I'm 22 years old now, and before any of this happened, I didn't believe in ghosts, monsters, curses, or anything else people usually blame when they can't explain something. I grew up in a normal house, with normal parents. At least that was what I believed. Looking back, there was one rule in our family that should have seemed strange to me much earlier. My parents never let my sister Maya or me visit our grandfather's farm. Not for Christmas. Not during summer vacation. Not for birthdays. Nothing. There was only one exception. A single afternoon when I was 7 and Maya was 5. I remembered almost nothing about that visit for years. It existed somewhere in my mind like a photograph with most of the details faded away. Then, 3 weeks ago, my grandfather Silas called me. He was 81 years old. His hip had gotten bad, and he said managing the farm alone was becoming too difficult. He needed help feeding the animals, fixing fences, moving equipment, and doing all the jobs that had become harder as he got older. He asked if I could stay with him for a while. I said yes. I wish I hadn't. I wish more than anything that I had made up an excuse, told him I was busy, promised to visit another time. Anything, the farm sat on land so flat that staring across it for too long could mess with your sense of distance. There were no mountains, no hills, not even a gentle rise in the ground, just fields stretching in every direction until the crops seemed to merge with the sky. The dirt road leading to my grandfather's property ran straight for what felt like miles, and then simply ended at his yard. The nearest town was about an hour away by car. Grandpa Silas didn't even have a working vehicle anymore. His old truck had died years earlier and never been repaired. Whenever he needed supplies, he saddled his horse, Sadie, and made the long trip into town. It could take most of the day. I remember getting out of my car that first afternoon and slowly turning in a circle. The property was beautiful in a lonely sort of way, but I immediately felt something I couldn't explain. Exposed, that is the best word for it. There was nowhere to hide, nothing to interrupt the endless fields. The sky felt enormous above me. To the east, maybe a third of a mile away, stood a dense tree line. The forest looked completely different from the rest of the landscape. Dark, crowded, the trees grew so close together that even during the day, the spaces between their trunks looked almost completely black. Grandpa's house sat between that forest and the dirt road. Behind the house was a shed. Farther back stood the barn where the remaining animals were kept at night. The shed deserves its own explanation because it ended up being far more important than I understood at first. It was enormous. Around 45 feet tall. Weathered gray wood covered the outside. The walls were incredibly thick, far thicker than any normal farm building needed. 2 massive doors stood at the front, secured with heavy iron hardware that looked ancient. I asked Grandpa what he used it for. Cattle feed, he said. That seemed reasonable enough. I believed him. The first few days at the farm were actually good. We repaired sections of fencing, fed the animals, talked, Grandpa told me stories about my father when he was younger. For a while, I stopped thinking about how strange the property felt. Then one morning, Grandpa counted the cattle. He counted them again. One was missing. He didn't say much. He went into the house, returned carrying his rifle, and started walking toward the pasture. I followed. We found the cow halfway across the field. She was lying on her side, opened. I don't know how else to describe it. She hadn't been ripped apart the way an animal attack usually looks. I'd seen videos of coyotes feeding. I'd seen roadkill. This wasn't anything like that. The cuts were clean. Precise, certain organs had been removed. Nothing else seemed disturbed. It looked like someone with surgical knowledge had opened the cow, selected what they wanted, and left the rest behind. I vomited in the grass. Grandpa didn't. He stood over the carcass silently. His face didn't show surprise. That bothered me almost as much as the cow. "Call the police," I said. "No, Grandpa, someone did this." "No police. What if whoever did this comes back?" He looked at me. "Drop it, Derek." I didn't. Later that day, I drove to some nearby properties. Eventually, I found a local hunter willing to come inspect the carcass if I paid him. The man arrived acting confident. He carried a shotgun and joked about coyotes. Then he saw the cow. All the confidence disappeared. He went pale. He didn't crouch down, didn't examine the wounds. He simply stared for several seconds, shook his head, and started walking back toward his truck. "Wait," I followed him. "I'll pay you double. Just tell me what did this." He didn't turn around. He climbed into his truck and drove away. Grandpa stood beside me, watching dust rise from the road. After a long silence, he said, "Stay close to the house after dark." His voice was quiet. I mean it. 3 days passed. Nothing happened. On the fourth evening, another cow failed to return from the field. We searched. There was no body this time. Only blood. A thin red line crossed the grass, perfectly straight. It continued all the way toward the forest. There were no drag marks beside it. No signs that a large animal had struggled. No disturbed soil. It looked as if something had lifted the cow off the ground while blood dripped beneath her. The trail ended at the trees. Grandpa stopped several feet away. "She's not coming back." "How do you know?" "None of them do when they're taken that way." I turned toward him. "What does that mean?" He walked back toward the house without answering. After that, the cattle began disappearing steadily. Not every night. Sometimes several days passed. That almost made it worse, because we never knew when the next one would vanish. I started dreading sunset. Every evening we'd count the herd. 11, then 10. 9, 7, 5. By the end of my third week on the farm, there was one cow left. A stubborn brown animal that spent most of her time pacing near the fence, watching the trees. It seemed ridiculous to think a cow could understand what was happening. But watching her, I began wondering if animals noticed things humans worked hard to ignore. One night, I couldn't sleep. I looked out my bedroom window. Grandpa Silas was standing in the yard, barefoot, wearing his nightclothes. He wasn't moving. He was staring toward the forest. I went outside. "Grandpa?" He turned. I will never forget his expression. It wasn't exactly fear. It was grief. Old grief. The kind a person carries so long that it becomes part of their face. "Go inside," he said. "What's going on? Please, Derek. I should have stayed. I should have made him explain everything." Instead, I listened. I went back inside. I've hated myself for that ever since. I woke to screaming. Not the kind of scream someone makes when startled. This was raw terror. Animal terror. "Grandpa," I threw myself out of bed and ran outside barefoot. The air was cold enough to hurt my lungs. He was about 30 yards from the house. Something was dragging him. At first, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. The creature moved low to the ground, four-legged, maybe, except nothing about its movement looked like a normal animal. Its joints bent at impossible angles. Its limbs seemed too long in some places and too short in others. It moved in a horrible loping rhythm that made my eyes struggle to follow it. I saw patchy, coarse fur stretched over an angular body. Then its head turned toward me. Not naturally. It snapped sideways like a puppet being jerked by strings. Its eyes reflected the moonlight, yellow-white, and they were roughly level with my own. For maybe 2 seconds, we looked at each other. Then the creature surged forward, fast, faster than anything that size should have been able to move. Grandpa screamed again as he was dragged across the field. I ran after them. Grandpa. I chased them toward the trees. My lungs burned. My bare feet hit stones and sticks. I didn't care. But the thing was too fast. By the time I reached the tree line, both of them had vanished. All that remained was a smear of blood leading between the trees. I stood there. The forest was completely dark. I wanted to follow. I couldn't. There are moments when cowardice and survival instinct feel exactly the same. That was one of them. Every part of my body refused to step beneath those branches. So I went for help. I drove to nearby farms and woke people. By morning, we had organized a search party. We searched the forest for 2 days. Nothing, no body, no clothes, no footprints we could identify, no den. Nothing. The farmers kept offering explanations. Wolves. Maybe an old man became confused and wandered into the woods. One actually suggested Grandpa might have fallen somewhere. I wanted to scream. I had watched something drag him away. But I learned very quickly that people prefer a bad explanation they understand to a terrifying explanation they don't. Maya arrived on the 3rd day. She stepped out of her car, looked across the enormous flat pasture, then toward the dark forest. She wrapped her arms around herself. Why does this place feel like it's watching us? The words hit me, because that was exactly how I'd felt since arriving. That evening, while we walked around the property, a memory came back to me. Not gradually. Suddenly, I was 7 years old again. Maya was 5. Our parents had brought us to Grandpa's farm. It had been daytime. Sunny, everything seemed normal. Then, Mom went inside to use the bathroom. When she came back out, she was pale. Her hands were shaking. She grabbed my hand. Then, Maya's. Time to go home, kids. Her voice was too tight. Dad was already sitting in the car, engine running. He wasn't looking at Grandpa. He wasn't looking toward the barn. He was staring straight down the dirt road like turning his head might cause something terrible to happen. Grandpa stood on the porch, watching us leave. He had the same expression I'd seen on him the night he disappeared. That old grief. We never visited again. As a child, I assumed there had been some family argument. Now I understood. My parents hadn't been protecting themselves from Grandpa. They had been protecting us from the farm. A few hours later, Maya and I found the hidden room. It was behind a false wall in Grandpa's study. We discovered it almost by accident while looking through drawers for documents related to his property. The room was narrow. No windows, no wiring, no lights. We used flashlights. Shelves lined the walls. Books, ledgers, old documents, and one thick leather-bound journal. We sat on the floor and started reading. What we found inside changed everything. The journal had been passed down through generations. Every head of the family who lived on the farm had written in it. The earliest entries went back to our ancestors first settling the land. They described missing livestock, Animals opened with surgical precision, blood trails leading toward the forest, and a creature, something covered in patchy fur, something that moved incorrectly, eyes reflecting light like an animal's, but positioned in a face disturbingly close to human. The journal gave it a name, Skinwalker. 4 generations, our family had been feeding it. Offerings were left near the tree line. Animals, meat, anything that might satisfy it enough to keep it away from the house. Most of the time, according to the journal, that worked. But not always. Sometimes the creature became uncontrollable. The writers called it going rogue. That was when the shed became necessary. The huge structure Grandpa claimed contained cattle feed had never been designed for feed. It was a trap. The thick walls, the iron doors. Everything was built to hold the creature. The instructions in the journal were extremely specific. Lure it into the shed. Close the doors. Lock them. Then recite Mark, chapter 5, verses 8 through 13. The passage about the demon calling itself Legion. After that, a special family knife had to be driven directly into the creature's heart. We found the knife wrapped in cloth inside a locked drawer. The blade was covered in crosses from edge to edge. At the bottom of the handle, a small cloth sponge had been attached. According to the journal, the sponge had to absorb blood directly from the creature's heart. Then that blood had to be used to paint a cross across the outside doors of the shed. Only then would the structure become sealed. Maya looked at me. Her face was almost white beneath the flashlight. Derek, what? Grandpa didn't just get taken. I already knew where she was going. He did it on purpose. The journal made it obvious. Grandpa had been feeding the creature, keeping it satisfied, protecting us. When the offering stopped being enough and it finally went rogue, he gave himself to it. He had walked into that yard knowing what would happen. That's why he told me to go inside. He was buying us time. Then a sound came from outside. A panicked animal cry. We ran. The gate to the last cow's pasture stood open. The cow was gone. Another thin line of blood crossed the field and disappeared toward the forest. Maya grabbed my arm. That was the last one. Not quite. We both looked toward the barn. Sadie stood inside. Grandpa's horse. She was an old chestnut mare. Gentle, patient, the kind of horse that lowered her head whenever you approached, because she expected affection. The journal had been clear. The trap required live bait. I started crying before we even reached her. There was nothing else alive on the farm large enough. All the cattle were gone. Grandpa was gone. If we waited, maybe the creature would come for us next. So, I led Sadie toward the shed. She followed willingly. That almost destroyed me. She trusted us. We tied her in the center. One lantern illuminated the enormous interior. Maya stayed outside. Heavy ropes were connected to the main doors so she could pull them closed from a distance. I went inside. I hid behind stacks of wooden pallets. The engraved knife felt cold in my hands. Then we waited. The light outside slowly disappeared. Gray became dark blue. Then black. Eventually, I heard something. Clicking, low, guttural, like someone repeatedly moving their tongue against their teeth. Sadie heard it too. Her ears went back. She started pulling against the rope. The clicking came closer. Then something stepped into the lantern light. It was the creature. Seeing it clearly was worse than seeing it drag Grandpa away. Patchy fur covered parts of its body. Other areas showed skin stretched tightly over a frame that seemed assembled incorrectly. Its legs bent wrong. Its shoulders sat too high. Its jaw opened, far too wide. Sadie screamed. The creature charged. It moved with terrifying speed. One second, it stood near the entrance. The next, it was on her. Claws tore into Sadie's side. She screamed again, a horrible broken sound. Then Maya pulled the ropes. The huge doors slammed shut. Boom, the entire shed shook. The iron locking bar dropped into place outside. I was trapped inside with it. The creature turned. Sadie collapsed behind it. Blood spread beneath her. My legs felt useless. I forced myself to stand. The creature clicked. Then I started reciting the passage. And Jesus asked him, "What is thy name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." The creature stopped. Completely, its pale eyes locked onto me. The clicking changed. It knew the words, or hated them, maybe feared them. I continued. My voice shook badly. The creature remained still. I remembered the journal, the hesitation. That was the opportunity. I ran. I don't remember making the decision. I simply found myself moving. I grabbed the knife with both hands. The creature lunged. I drove the blade into its chest. Something hot covered my hands. The creature screamed. The sound seemed too large to come from one throat. I pushed harder. The sponge attached to the handle became soaked. Warm blood filled my fist. I kept reciting. I screamed the rest of the passage directly into the creature's face. About Legion, about the swine, about the herd rushing into the sea. The creature twisted. Its face seemed to change. For one moment, I thought I saw Grandpa. Then a cow. Then something human. Then nothing I could recognize. I pulled the knife free. I don't remember how I reached the side exit. I only remember stumbling outside and breathing cold air. Maya was waiting. Together, we used the blood soaked into the sponge. We painted a large cross across the main doors. The creature slammed into them from inside. Once, twice, then stopped. We stayed there until morning. Sadie survived the attack. Barely, we carried her out after daylight. The wounds were too deep. We tried everything we could. 3 days later, she died. We buried her in the pasture. That hurt almost as much as anything else. She felt like the last innocent thing left on the property. It has been 6 days since the ritual. Maya and I are still here. We tell people there are practical reasons. Grandpa is missing. There are calls to make. Authorities still want information. There may eventually be a funeral, though we have no body to bury. The property needs attention. All reasonable excuses. The truth is simpler. We're terrified to leave the shed alone. Every night I sit on the porch. The fields stretch out beneath the dark sky. The forest stands silent in the distance. The shed is visible behind the house, that enormous structure with its thick doors. Across them is the dried brown red cross Maya and I painted together. Most nights, nothing happens. But sometimes the wind stops. No insects, no movement in the grass. Complete silence. Then I hear it. From inside the shed. Breathing, slow, deep, alive. The first time I heard it, I ran back to the journal. I read the ritual instructions again. Every word. Lure it inside. Seal the doors. Recite the passage. Pierce the heart. Use its blood. Mark the doors. I kept searching for the line that said the creature would die. There wasn't one. Not anywhere. The journal never said killing it was possible. It said the shed would hold it. That's all. Hold, I don't know what that means. A week? A year? My lifetime? Maybe several generations. Maybe one night I'll wake up and find the cross faded. Maybe the doors will begin moving. Maybe the iron will eventually rust through. Maya asked whether we should burn the shed. I told her no. The journal specifically warns against damaging it once the creature is sealed inside. We don't know what fire would do. We don't know whether destroying the walls would free it. We don't really know anything except what generations of frightened people wrote in that book. Sometimes I think about my parents. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. That afternoon, when I was 7, Mom must have found something inside Grandpa's house. Maybe the hidden room. Maybe the journal. Maybe she heard something from the shed. Whatever happened, she and Dad decided their children would never return. And Grandpa accepted it. That's the part that hurts most. For 60 years, he lived here almost alone. He fed the creature, maintained the trap, lost livestock, watched the forest, kept his children and grandchildren away because he understood that loving us meant making sure we never learned what he was carrying. Then age caught up with him. His hip failed. The work became too much. He called me. Maybe he truly believed he could finally tell me. Maybe he was simply lonely. Or maybe he already knew the creature was becoming uncontrollable and needed someone here to inherit the responsibility. I don't know. I'll never get the chance to ask him. Sometimes, while sitting on the porch, I look toward the exact place where I last saw him. 30 yards from the house, dragged across the grass. I remember his scream. Then I remember his face the night before. That wasn't the face of someone surprised by what was coming. He knew. He had probably known for days, maybe weeks. When he stood outside staring at those trees, he wasn't watching for the creature. He was saying goodbye. I wish I had stayed with him. I wish I'd asked. Maybe he would have told me everything. Maybe none of this would have changed. But at least he wouldn't have walked into that field alone. Maya doesn't sleep much either. Some nights she sits beside me. We don't talk. There isn't much left to say. We watch the shed. Listen. Wait. The final cow is gone. Sadie is buried. Grandpa is somewhere in those woods. And behind 2 massive wooden doors, something that has haunted our family for generations is still breathing. The journal sits on the table beside me every night. I've started reading the older entries carefully, not just the ritual. Everything. There are mentions of other farms, other families. Some passages suggest our ancestors weren't the only people who made agreements with things living beyond the fields. One entry says the creature learned faces. Another says, never answer a familiar voice coming from the trees after sunset. I wish I'd found that part before last night. Around 2 in the morning, I heard someone call my name. Derek from the forest. I stood. Maya grabbed my arm. The voice came again. Derek, Grandpa's voice. Perfectly, weak, afraid, help me. Every part of me wanted to run toward the trees. Maya held tighter. That's not him. I knew. Still, hearing his voice almost broke me. Then the shed answered. Something inside slammed into the doors. The sound rolled across the field like thunder. The voice in the forest stopped. For a few seconds, everything remained silent. Then, something laughed between the trees. Far away. Maybe there is more than one. I haven't told Maya that thought. Not yet. The journal calls the trapped creature a skinwalker, but some entries use plural language. They, them, the ones beyond the tree line. Maybe the thing we trapped wasn't the entire problem. Maybe it was only the one assigned to our family. Maybe Grandpa's offerings didn't keep one creature fed. Maybe they were a payment, a boundary, a promise. And now the one inside the shed can no longer collect. I don't know what happens when the others realize that. There is another entry I found this morning. It was written by my great-grandfather. One sentence had been underlined several times. The keeper must remain on the land while the heart still beats behind the doors. I read it again, then again. The heart still beats. That explains why the ritual requires stabbing it. We weren't trying to kill the creature. We were marking its heart, making the blood necessary for the seal. The creature has to remain alive. The cross only holds while whatever is inside continues breathing, which means somebody has to remain here, watching, maintaining the property, protecting the shed. A keeper. Grandpa was the keeper. Before him, his father. Before him, someone else. And now, I think it's me. Maya wants us to leave. She hasn't said it directly, but I can see it in the way she watches the road. Our cars still work. We could drive away right now. Maybe we should. Maybe the creature would remain trapped forever. But what if the journal is right? What happens when nobody is here? What happens when the cross begins fading? What happens if some future property developer buys the land and tears down the old shed because they think it's useless? Imagine construction workers opening those doors. Imagine whatever has spent decades inside finally stepping into daylight. Grandpa understood that possibility. That's why he stayed. 60 years. Alone, protecting people who didn't even know they needed protection. I used to think he was stubborn. My father sometimes called him antisocial. Now I think he was probably terrified every day of his adult life. And still, he stayed. The sun will be going down soon. Maya is inside making coffee. I've started keeping Grandpa's rifle beside me on the porch, even though I don't believe bullets would do much. The engraved knife never leaves my pocket. The cross on the doors is already turning darker as the blood dries. For now, it looks intact. The doors haven't moved today. But when I put my ear near them this afternoon, I heard something. Not only breathing, clicking slowly like a tongue against teeth. Then a voice. My voice. It whispered from behind the doors. Maya, I stepped away immediately. I haven't told her. I don't know why the creature is learning my voice. Maybe that's what the journal meant when it said they learn faces. Maybe voices come first. Maybe eventually it will sound like Grandpa again. Or Mom. Or Dad. Maybe one night Maya will hear me screaming from inside the shed while I'm asleep in the house. Maybe she'll open the door. That is how this place works. It doesn't only trap monsters. It traps families. Every generation thinks it is protecting the next. Then eventually, somebody has to stay. Grandpa spent 60 years trying to keep this burden away from us. In the end, he failed. But sitting here beneath this enormous empty sky, watching the dark tree line and listening to the thing breathing behind those doors, I finally understand why he tried. Because now, I know what he knew. Once you understand what lives on this land, leaving doesn't feel like escaping. It feels like opening the door for everyone else. I used to think I understood how the world worked. Not perfectly, obviously, but well enough. I spent a ridiculous amount of time reading about unsolved crimes, strange disappearances, government conspiracies, paranormal encounters, and whatever other weird corner of the internet I could find. If there was a mystery nobody had solved, I probably had a folder full of screenshots about it. I liked thinking of myself as an internet detective. Not in some professional sense. I wasn't solving murders or exposing politicians. Mostly, I spent nights digging through forums, comparing old news articles, looking at archived websites, and listening to true crime podcasts until 2 or 3 in the morning. I thought I'd seen everything the internet could throw at me. I hadn't. Before I explain what happened, you need to understand a little about where I live. My neighborhood isn't exactly dangerous, but nobody would describe it as fancy either. There are no perfect white fences or freshly painted houses lined up like something from a commercial. Some lawns are maintained, some aren't. A few houses have security cameras. A few have broken shutters that haven't been repaired in years. You hear arguments sometimes. Cars get broken into. Packages disappear from porches. normal suburban problems. My neighbor across the street is named Reggie, or was. I still don't know which word I should use. Reggie was one of the strangest people I'd ever met long before any of this started. He was an older guy, maybe somewhere in his 60s, though he never gave me an exact age. He had long gray hair, usually tied behind his head, and dressed like he'd walked directly out of a hippie commune from the 1970s. Loose shirts, old sandals, beaded bracelets. He burned incense constantly. His house smelled like a mixture of weed, sage, old books, and whatever essential oil he decided was spiritually important that week. Reggie believed in everything: ghosts, spirits, crystals, energy fields, astral projection, past lives, third eyes. He once spent 20 minutes explaining to me that certain street intersections could become spiritually stagnant. I made fun of him constantly. He never cared. The reason I still hung out with him was simple. Reggie had excellent weed. I'm not going to pretend there was some deeper friendship at first. He had good weed. I liked smoking. Eventually, we became actual friends. He was weird, but he was kind. And honestly, spending an afternoon listening to him explain how crystals could remember emotions was more entertaining than sitting alone scrolling through Reddit. For my birthday, Reggie gave me a charm. It was ugly. A strange little bundle wrapped in dark thread with something hard inside it. There were tiny pieces of what looked like bone or shell tied around the outside. It smelled terrible. Salt, old breath, something herbal, maybe sweat. I held it up. What the hell is this? Protection. From what? Reggie smiled. Bad luck. If this is your idea of a birthday present, I understand why you live alone. He laughed. Keep it. I threw it into my desk drawer and mostly forgot about it. That turned out to be one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Or maybe keeping it saved my life. I still haven't decided. One afternoon, not long before everything happened, Reggie and I were sitting on his front porch smoking. It was warm outside. People were driving home from work. A dog kept barking somewhere down the street. Nothing unusual. I started talking about my internet mystery obsession. I told Reggie about some disappearance I'd been researching. He listened quietly. Then he smiled. You know what I like about you? That I bring snacks? You're a truth seeker. I laughed. That's dramatic. No, man, I'm serious. He pointed at me with the joint. You look. Most people don't look. I spend 12 hours reading conspiracy forums because I have no social life. Same difference. I shook my head. Reggie leaned back in his chair. You see things with your eyes. You hear things with your ears. That's good. He tapped his forehead. But you'll see a whole lot more when you open the third eye. I stared at him. Third eye? Yeah, Reggie, you are extremely high. Dude, he dragged the word out. I may be greening a little, but you need to listen. He took another hit. Smoke drifted from his nose. Truth seekers see things. Okay, cool things. Sure, beautiful things. I nodded dramatically. Then his expression changed. And some really fucked things. I stopped smiling. But you can't look away when the fucked things show up. He pointed at me again. You take the good with the bad. I laughed because Reggie had spent half our friendship saying things that sounded meaningful until you thought about them too long. So what? You see me becoming some famous investigative journalist? Fuck no. He sat upright, come back down to earth. We both started laughing. We spent the rest of the afternoon smoking and eating beef jerky. Looking back, that was the last normal afternoon I ever had with Reggie. That night, I was exploring the deep web. And yes, I know what people say. Don't go wandering around places you don't understand. Don't click random links. Don't download things. I wasn't completely reckless. I used a VPN. I had security software. I kept everything isolated as much as I could. Mostly the deep web was disappointing anyway. Broken forums, scam markets, dead websites, people trying way too hard to look dangerous, strange art projects, conspiracy communities even worse than the normal internet. Then I found something unusual, a private email server. At first, I didn't understand why it interested me. Email isn't exactly exciting. Why would someone need a hidden server like that? There were several categories. Most were empty or inaccessible. Then one received a new message. Assignments. That word caught my attention. I opened it. The message was addressed to someone named Sable. It said that head office had an assignment requiring extreme precision and discretion. The target was described as a subversive type subject. There was a location attached. I won't repeat it. I don't want whoever these people are tracing this story back to me. The message also mentioned containment protocols that needed to be considered when eliminating the target. Eliminating, not watching, not questioning. Eliminating, my first thought was that I had found some role-playing game, maybe an alternate reality project. People create strange fictional experiences online all the time. Then I read it again. Something about the wording felt wrong. Too dry. Too professional. The message ended by telling Sable to privately request details about the subject and report once the assignment was complete. Signed, Slate. I took a screenshot. Immediately, if this was real, I wanted evidence. Maybe something I could take to the police. Then I realized taking the screenshot might have been a terrible idea. A new message appeared. Different sender. Yet, it was addressed to the entire department. An unauthorized person had been detected on the server. All available agents were ordered to rendezvous to the area immediately. I stared at the screen. My stomach dropped. Area? What area? The target's area? My area? Could they see me? Could they identify my computer? I disconnected immediately. Closed everything. Shut the computer down. Then I went through the entire house. Lights off. Front door locked. Back door locked. Windows checked. Curtains closed. I even checked the bathroom window, even though nobody could reasonably fit through it. My hands were shaking. I kept telling myself I was being stupid. This was probably some online community playing a game. Maybe their security system automatically sent dramatic messages when somebody entered without permission. Maybe there was no real danger. Still, I couldn't relax. I went upstairs. My bedroom window faced Reggie's house. I hid behind the curtains and looked across the street. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over 911. What would I say? Hello? I think a secret assassination department discovered me reading their email server on the deep web. They'd ask whether I was high. Considering I'd been smoking with Reggie that afternoon, technically the answer wouldn't even be completely no. So instead, I called Reggie. He answered quickly. Yeah? Reggie, my voice came out too loud. I lowered it. Reggie, listen to me. You need to get out of your house. Silence, there's someone coming. His response was much calmer than I wanted. What? I found something online. I think people are coming here. Another pause. Then he said, listen, I can handle it. Handle what? Stay inside. Reggie, stay quiet. Then his voice became serious. And don't let go of your birthday present. I froze. What? The charm. What does that have to do with anything? Just keep it close. Reggie, what the hell is going on? He hung up. I stared at my phone. Damn it, Reggie. I tried calling again. No answer. For the next 30 minutes, I watched his house. Nothing. The street remained quiet. A few cars passed. Someone walked a dog. Normal, then a black BMW pulled up. It stopped directly in front of Reggie's driveway. My heart started pounding. A man got out. Tall, dark suit. Short gray hair slicked backward. He walked toward Reggie's front door. No hesitation, no looking around, like he already knew exactly where he was going. He knocked. Once, waited, nobody answered. He knocked again. Still nothing. Then he reached beneath his jacket, pulled out a handgun. I nearly dropped my phone. The man aimed at the doorknob. Fired. The lock exploded. He kicked the door open and entered. I wanted to do something. Call police. Run across the street. Anything, but I couldn't move. I stood behind my curtain, feeling completely useless. The street became silent again. I waited. 10 seconds. 20, maybe more. Then came a gunshot. Bang, I ducked instinctively. My knees hit the floor. My ears were ringing even though the shot came from across the street. One thought repeated in my mind. Reggie is dead. Reggie is dead. Reggie is dead. Then I remembered what he'd said. Don't let go of your birthday present. The charm. I scrambled toward my desk, pulled open the drawer. There it was. Same ugly thing, same horrible smell. I grabbed it. The moment it touched my palm, the panic changed. It didn't disappear, but I felt strangely aware, like the room sharpened around me. I heard something downstairs. Knocking, 3 slow knocks. I froze beside the desk. Then a man's voice came through the front door. Not speaking to me, speaking into something. Slate, I'm detecting something in the house across the street. Pause. I can't. Silence, then. No, I can't. My stomach tightened. He couldn't what? Enter? Locate me? Detect something? I moved downstairs carefully, kept to the darker side of the hallway. The charm stayed clenched in my hand. The man knocked again, then raised his voice. Hello? Anyone home? Pause. This is Detective Sable. I need to ask some questions. Sable, the name from the assignment. My fear turned into something else. Anger. I walked closer to the door. Didn't open it. What seems to be the problem, Detective? There was a pause. Then, he answered in a calm, professional voice. I found your neighbor deceased earlier. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Found? Yes, can I come in? That was the moment something clicked. Why ask? He had shot his way into Reggie's house. Why not do the same here? My eyes moved toward the charm in my hand. Maybe Reggie hadn't been talking nonsense. Maybe this thing mattered. No, I said. The man didn't respond immediately. I continued. I didn't see anything. I was sleeping. I heard him shift outside. It would not be to your advantage to lie. His voice had changed slightly, still controlled, but colder. Then he said, "What are you holding?" I looked down. My fingers were wrapped tightly around the charm. I pushed it into my back pocket. Nothing handed over. Why? It's contaminated. That word bothered me. Contaminated, not cursed, not dangerous. Contaminated, Reggie touched it all the time, I said. I haven't gotten sick. Silence, then Sable said, "Just give it to me and I'll leave." I almost laughed. You're standing right there. He didn't answer. So take it. Nothing, you broke into Reggie's house. Still silence. Why can't you come inside mine? I stepped closer to the door. I didn't know what I was doing. Fear makes you stupid. Curiosity makes you worse. I slowly opened the door. Sable stood on the porch. He looked exactly like I'd seen through the window. Tall, gray hair, dark suit, black leather gloves. But seeing him closely revealed small details that made me uncomfortable. His skin was too smooth, not young, just lacking texture. His eyes barely moved. He stood perfectly straight. Can I come in? Again, the question. I remained behind the threshold. I already told you. I didn't see anything. His face tightened. Not naturally. It was like someone adjusting an expression after remembering how anger should look. It would not be to your advantage to lie. Then his eyes dropped toward my back pocket. The object. What about it? Give it to me. Why? It is contaminated. With what? He stared. I waited. Nothing. Why don't you just take it? His jaw tightened. I almost smiled. You can't, can you? That was dangerous. I knew it as soon as I said it. Sable's eyes changed, only slightly. But something inside them sharpened. He stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then said, "You'll find your circumstances changing." The words sounded rehearsed, formal. Have a pleasant night. He turned, walked toward the BMW, got inside, drove away. I shut the door immediately, locked it, then locked it again, even though there wasn't another lock. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling until exhaustion eventually took me. The charm remained beneath my pillow. Morning came. Sunlight, traffic, normal neighborhood sounds. Reggie's house had police tape around it. Actual police this time. I watched officers move in and out. I considered going over, then stopped. What would I tell them? That the murderer had introduced himself to me afterward? That he was apparently part of some secret department using a hidden email server? That he couldn't enter my house because of a smelly birthday charm? No. I needed proof. I checked the deep web again. The server was gone, of course. The screenshot was still on my computer. At least I had that. I thought maybe the worst part was over. Then I checked the mail. There was an envelope from my landlord. Eviction notice. According to the letter, I had failed to pay my rent. I read it twice. Then, a third time. Impossible, I'd paid. On time. I checked my banking app. The payment wasn't there. Not declined. Not reversed. Gone, there was no transaction. I searched my email. The payment confirmation had disappeared. I searched my messages. Nothing. I called my landlord. He sounded annoyed. "You haven't paid." I did. "No, you didn't. I have proof." I stopped. I didn't. Not anymore. He told me I had 2 days to leave. 2 days. Then Sable's words returned. "You'll find your circumstances changing." I sat on the floor holding the eviction notice. That was when I understood. He hadn't been threatening to break into my house. He didn't need to. If something prevented him from crossing the threshold, then he would simply remove the threshold. Get me evicted. Force me outside. Take away whatever legal or spiritual protection counted as my home. I pulled the charm from my pocket. The smell seemed stronger. Salt, rotten breath, something smoky. I called Reggie. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then I remembered he'd supposedly been found dead. I crossed the street. Police were gone by then. Tape remained across the front door. I stayed on the sidewalk. That's when I noticed something strange. There was no damage to the doorknob. I had watched Sable shoot it. I saw the gun, heard the shot, saw the door open, but the lock looked completely intact. I moved closer. The front window was broken. Maybe that had happened during the investigation. I looked through. Reggie's living room seemed normal. Incense burner, crystals, old couch. Then I saw something on the coffee table. A joint, still burning. Smoke rose from the tip. My entire body went cold. Reggie had supposedly died the night before. Nobody leaves a joint burning for that long. I stepped away from the window. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. You were told not to look away. I almost dropped the phone. Another message arrived. Truth seekers require access. Then another. Protection is temporary. I deleted nothing. Screenshots, everything. I backed away from Reggie's property. A movement in the upstairs window caught my eye. Someone stood behind the curtain. I couldn't see a face, only a silhouette. Long hair, thin shoulders. Reggie, I think. I called his name. The figure disappeared. I nearly crossed the yard. Then remembered what he'd told me. Stay inside. Stay quiet. Don't let go of the birthday present. Except now, I didn't have an inside much longer. 2 days. I called my sister. She lives in an apartment in the city. I told her my landlord was forcing me out because of a payment issue. I didn't explain the rest. She said I could stay with her. So that's where I'm going. But before I started packing, I examined the charm properly. For the first time. The thread wasn't random. There were tiny patterns tied into it. Knots within knots. The hard object inside wasn't stone. It looked like a piece of tooth. Human or animal, I couldn't tell. The white grains I assumed were salt were definitely salt. There was also dried plant material and one tiny strip of paper. I almost didn't unfold it. Eventually, I did. There were 3 words written inside. Do not invite. That's it. No explanation. Do not invite. Suddenly, every conversation with Sable made sense. Can I come in? Can I come in? Can I come in? He needed permission. Or something needed permission. Reggie knew. Maybe he'd spent years preparing for this. Maybe he didn't give me the charm because he thought it would bring good luck. Maybe he gave it to me because he knew I would eventually see something I wasn't supposed to see. That afternoon on the porch feels different now. You are going to see some cool shit. You are going to see some really fucked shit. But you can't look away. Maybe he wasn't rambling. Maybe he was warning me. I packed quickly. Clothes, laptop, documents, food, anything important. The charm stayed around my neck. I wasn't touching it constantly, but I wasn't letting it leave my body either. Before sunset, another message appeared from the unknown number. Vacate voluntarily. I ignored it. Then, the structure no longer recognizes you. That one scared me. I checked the locks. Still locked. The house felt normal. Then someone knocked. I didn't move. 3 knocks. Slow, measured A voice came through. My landlord. Hey, we need to talk. I checked through the peephole. He was standing outside. At least it looked like him. I almost opened the door. Then I noticed his hands. Black gloves. My landlord never wore gloves. Not in summer. Not ever. Open up. I stayed silent. He knocked harder. You're being unreasonable. Then his voice changed. Only for a second. Became lower. Flatter, your circumstances have changed. I backed away. The charm became warm against my chest. Not painfully hot, but warm enough that I could feel it through my shirt. The person outside stopped knocking. A few seconds later, footsteps moved away. I checked the window. Nobody was there. No car. Nothing. That was about an hour ago. I'm writing this because I don't know what happens next. I'm leaving for my sister's place soon. But I keep thinking about the wording on that deep web message. Subversive type subject. Containment protocols. Eliminate the target. Was Reggie the target? Probably, but why? What made him subversive? Maybe because he knew about them. Maybe because he could stop them from entering certain places. Maybe because of the charms, or maybe Reggie was something else entirely. I don't know. The screenshot from the server changed, too. I checked it while packing. The original assignment is still visible, but there's now another line at the bottom that wasn't there before. Secondary subject identified. Below it is my name, not my username, my real name. Then beneath that, status, aware. I haven't shown my sister. I haven't told the police. Not yet. I don't know who I can trust. If these people can alter bank records, send fake eviction notices, imitate voices, and somehow make evidence disappear, then calling authorities might only tell them where I'm going. I'm still going to my sister's apartment. I don't have another option. But I don't think the city will protect me. I don't think distance will either. Whatever Sable is, he didn't threaten to hunt me. He threatened to change my circumstances. That's worse. Because I understand what that means now. If he can't enter my home, he'll make it stop being my home. If I have money, he'll erase it. If I have proof, he'll change it. If I have people I trust, maybe he'll use them too. The only thing he hasn't been able to touch is the charm. Reggie's stupid, ugly, disgusting-smelling birthday gift. I laughed when he gave it to me. I'm not laughing now. There's something else. A few minutes ago, I looked across the street one final time. Reggie's porch light was on. Police had shut off the power earlier. I'm certain of it. Someone was sitting in his usual chair. Long gray hair, same loose shirt, same posture. He raised one hand. For a second, I thought he was waving. Then I realized he was pointing toward his forehead. Third eye. I blinked. The chair was empty. Maybe grief is already getting to me. Maybe the weed damaged more of my brain than I realized. Maybe all of this has a normal explanation. I would love that. But the charm is warm again. Someone is outside. I can hear shoes on the pavement. More than one person. A car door just closed. Then another. I look through the upstairs curtain. 3 black vehicles are parked along the street. Men and women in dark suits are getting out. None of them are approaching my front door. They're standing around the property. Waiting, that's what scares me. They don't need to enter. The eviction deadline expires tomorrow. Maybe they're patient. Maybe they know the protection ends when the house stops belonging to me. Maybe that's what containment protocols means. Not chains, not cages, rules, thresholds, ownership, permission, things I used to think existed only on paper. I'm leaving through the back. I have my bag, my car keys, my phone, and Reggie's charm. I'm going to keep digging. That may be exactly what Reggie wanted. He called me a truth seeker. He said I'd see terrible things and couldn't look away. Well, Reggie, congratulations. I finally believe you. And if the people on that server are reading this, understand something. You already know I'm aware. You already know I'm looking. Maybe you're expecting me to become frightened enough to stop. I'm frightened. More than I've ever been. But I'm not stopping. Because somewhere between the private server, Reggie's death, the charm, and whatever Sable really is, there is an answer. And if Reggie died protecting that answer, I'm going to find it. I just hope being a truth seeker doesn't mean I have to see everything waiting on the other side. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. I used to think I had a pretty good understanding of how the world worked. Not perfect, obviously. I knew there were strange things out there. I spent enough late nights reading about unsolved disappearances, strange deaths, paranormal sightings, conspiracy theories, and cold cases to know that reality could get weird. But I still believed there was a line, a point where strange ended and impossible began. I thought I knew where that line was. I was wrong. For context, I've always been what you might call an internet sleuth, not professionally. I wasn't solving crimes or exposing governments. I was just the kind of person who could lose 6 hours reading archived forum posts about a missing person case from 15 years ago. I listened to true crime podcasts constantly. I browsed paranormal forums. I dug through old newspaper scans. I read conspiracy threads even when I knew most of them were nonsense. Sometimes I'd find one tiny detail that didn't fit the official explanation, and that would keep me awake half the night. I liked the feeling of looking beneath the surface, finding the thing other people missed. Maybe that's why all of this happened to me. I live in a suburban neighborhood that sits somewhere between decent and rough. It isn't the kind of place with perfect lawns, shiny SUVs, and white fences around every yard. But it isn't dangerous enough that I'm constantly looking over my shoulder either. Most of the houses are older. Some are well maintained. Some have paint peeling from the siding. There are a few empty lots. A couple houses have security bars over the basement windows. You hear arguments sometimes. Packages disappear from porches. People speed down the street at night. Nothing unusual for a neighborhood like mine. Across the street from me lived a man named Reggie. Reggie was weird long before I ever knew there was anything truly strange about him. He was an older guy, maybe in his early 60s, though I never asked exactly. Long gray hair, usually tied back, loose shirts, sandals, beads around his neck and wrists. The kind of man who looked like he had somehow survived every hippie commune from the 1970s and was disappointed the rest of the world hadn't joined him. He believed in everything. Spirits, crystals, energy, chakras, astrology, astral projection. He once spent nearly an hour explaining to me why certain houses could hold on to anger from previous owners. I laughed at him a lot. He never seemed offended. Honestly, the main reason we became friends was his weed. Reggie had some of the best weed I had ever smoked. So every once in a while, I'd walk across the street, sit on his porch, and waste an afternoon with him. Over time, I stopped seeing him as just the weird old guy across the road. He was funny, kind, he listened. And beneath all the nonsense about crystals and spirits, there were moments when he said things that stayed with me. For my birthday, Reggie gave me a charm. That was what he called it. Charm, to me, it looked like someone had gathered random junk from a beach, wrapped it together with dark thread, and then left it in a sweaty pocket for a week. It was ugly. There were little white pieces tied into it. Maybe shell, maybe bone. I didn't ask. The thing smelled terrible, too, like salt mixed with bad breath. When he handed it to me, I held it away from my face. What is this? Good luck. It smells like a corpse brushed its teeth with seawater. Reggie laughed so hard he started coughing. Keep it close. For good luck, for when you need it. I didn't take him seriously. I thanked him. Went home. Put it in a desk drawer. Forgot about it. One afternoon, not long before everything changed, I was sitting with Reggie on his front porch. We were smoking joints and eating beef jerky. The sun was still up. Cars passed occasionally. Someone farther down the street was mowing their lawn. It was normal. I started telling him about one of the unsolved cases I had been reading about online. I don't even remember which one. That part doesn't matter. What matters is how he looked at me. He took a drag, leaned back, and said, "You know what I like about you? That I bring snacks? You're a truth seeker." I laughed. Okay, no, seriously. He pointed at me with the joint. "You look for things. I waste time online." That's looking. He took another drag. "You use your eyes and ears. Good start." I already knew where this was going. Please don't say third eye. Third eye. I groaned. Reggie grinned. "You'll see way more once you open it. Reggie, you're baked." "Dude," he stretched the word out dramatically, "I may be greening a little, but listen." I laughed. He didn't. Not immediately. "You're going to see some cool shit. Great, and some really fucked shit." His tone changed enough that I stopped smiling. "But you can't look away from the fucked shit." He stared at me. "You take the good and the bad." I tried turning it into a joke. "So what, you see me becoming some famous journalist?" "Fuck no." He slapped his knee. "Come back down to earth." That got me laughing again. Soon he was laughing too. We spent the rest of the afternoon high and eating jerky. Looking back, that was the last normal afternoon I ever spent with Reggie. Later that night, I was browsing the deep web, and yes, before anyone starts lecturing me, I knew enough to be careful. VPN, security software, no personal accounts open, nothing downloaded unless I absolutely knew what it was. I wasn't just randomly clicking everything that appeared in front of me. Most of the deep web was boring anyway. Dead forums, scam markets, people selling fake, stolen data, weird art projects, conspiracy boards filled with people trying way too hard to sound dangerous. Then I stumbled onto something that looked almost completely ordinary. An email server. That was what made me curious. Why would anyone need a private email system hidden there? There were several categories. Some looked like internal departments. Most were empty. One had a notification beside it. Assignments, I clicked. There was a new message. It was addressed to someone named Sable. The message said that head office had an assignment requiring extreme precision and discretion. The target was described as a subversive type subject. There was a location attached. I am not sharing it. I don't know who these people are or what information they can use to find me. The message said that containment protocols had to be considered when eliminating the target. That word made me sit up. Eliminating, the message ended by telling Sable to request further details privately and report when the assignment was complete. It was signed, Slate. I stared at the screen. My first reaction was excitement. I hate admitting that. But for a few seconds, the internet sleuth part of my brain took over. This was exactly the kind of thing people online spent years looking for. Something hidden, something possibly real. Maybe evidence of some secret organization. Maybe criminals communicating privately. Maybe an elaborate role-playing game. I didn't know. So I took a screenshot. That was when everything changed. Another message appeared almost immediately. This one wasn't addressed to Sable. It was sent to everyone on the server. An unauthorized person had been detected. All available agents were ordered to rendezvous to the area immediately. Signed, Jet. I stopped breathing. For a second, I couldn't even move the mouse. Then, panic hit. I disconnected, closed everything, shut down the computer, pulled the power cable. I stood there staring at the black monitor. Maybe it was automated. Maybe they didn't know who I was. Maybe the area meant somewhere else. Then, I looked toward my window. Suddenly, my house felt exposed. I started turning lights off. Every room, kitchen, living room, hallway, bathroom. I checked every door, every window, locked everything. Then checked again. I returned upstairs and stayed beside my bedroom window. From there, I could see Reggie's house across the street. I hid behind the curtain and watched. Nothing happened. 10 minutes. 20. The street remained normal. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over 911. Then I imagined the conversation. Hello, I found an assassination order on a hidden email server, and I think they detected me. They'd ask whether I had proof. I had a screenshot. Then they'd ask why I was on the deep web. Then they'd probably ask whether I was under the influence. And technically, I had been smoking earlier. I could already hear how stupid the whole thing would sound. Instead, I called Reggie. He answered on the third ring. Yeah? Reggie, I was almost whispering. You need to get out of your house. Pause. What? I found something online. There are people coming. He was far too calm. Listen, I can handle it. Handle what? Stay inside. Reggie, stay quiet. Then his voice became serious. And don't let go of your birthday present. I froze. The charm? Yes, what does that have to do with anything? Keep it with you. Reggie, what the hell is going on? He hung up. I stared at my phone. Damn it, Reggie, I called again. No answer. About 30 minutes later, a black BMW turned onto the street. It moved slowly, then stopped directly in front of Reggie's driveway. My stomach dropped. A man got out. Tall, short gray hair slicked backward. Dark suit. He moved with a strange kind of confidence. Not rushed, not cautious. He walked straight toward Reggie's front door. Knocked, waited nothing, knocked again. Still nothing. Then he reached beneath his jacket, pulled out a handgun. I nearly shouted. He aimed at the doorknob. Bang, the shot cracked through the neighborhood. The lock broke. He pushed his way inside. I stood behind the curtain, feeling completely helpless. I should have called the police then. I know. But fear does strange things. Part of me kept expecting Reggie to somehow deal with it. He had said he could handle it. I waited. Nothing. The house across the street remained dark. Then, another gunshot. Bang, I dropped beneath the window. My heart slammed against my ribs. One thought filled my head. Reggie is dead. I crouched there for several seconds. Then I remembered his last instruction. Birthday present. The charm. I rushed to my desk, opened the drawer, grabbed it. The moment it touched my palm, I felt something strange. Not electricity, not exactly. More like the air around me became sharper. I could hear everything. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs. A car passing at the far end of the street. Then someone knocked on my front door. 3 times. Slow. I froze. The man outside said something. Not to me, to someone else. Slate, I'm detecting something in the house across the street. Pause, then. I can't. I held the charm tighter. He couldn't what? Enter? See me? Cross the property? I moved downstairs as quietly as possible. I stayed away from the windows. Another knock. Then his voice changed. Professional, calm. Hello? Anyone home? Pause, this is Detective Sable. I need to ask you some questions. Sable, the name from the email. My skin went cold. I walked closer to the door. I did not unlock it. What seems to be the problem, Detective? There was a brief pause. I found your neighbor deceased earlier. Deceased, not shot. Not murdered. Deceased, I need to ask you a few questions about him. Okay, can I come in? That was when something clicked in my head. Why ask? He had shot open Reggie's door. He had no problem forcing entry there. Why not here? My hand moved toward the charm. Maybe Reggie's nonsense wasn't nonsense. Maybe the ugly thing in my palm was doing something. I didn't see anything, I said. I was asleep. The man's voice became colder. It would not be to your advantage to lie. Then he added, "What are you holding?" I looked down. The charm. I slipped it into my back pocket. Why? Hand it over. What is it? It's contaminated. That word confused me. Contaminated with what? No answer. Reggie gave it to me. Silence. He handled it all the time. Still nothing. I'm not sick. Just hand it over and I'll leave. I stared at the door. Then an idea came to me. A stupid idea. Possibly the stupidest thing I could have done. But curiosity had already gotten me into this. Why don't you take it? No response. You're standing right there. Still nothing. Why can't you come inside? Long silence. Every instinct told me to keep the door closed. Instead, I wanted to see him. I wanted to know what I was dealing with. I unlocked the door. Opened it. Sable stood on the porch. Tall, slick gray hair. Dark suit fitted tightly around a thin body. Black leather gloves. Up close, something about him seemed wrong. I couldn't identify exactly what. His skin looked almost too smooth. His posture was too perfect. He didn't shift his weight, didn't blink as often as he should. He looked like someone performing the role of a person. Can I come in? Again, the same question. I stayed behind the threshold. Well, I said I told you. I was sleeping. His face changed, not naturally. The expression almost seemed to arrive in pieces. Brows first, then mouth, then jaw. A scowl. It would not be to your advantage to lie. His eyes moved toward my pocket. What is in your hand? I put it away. The object is contaminated. Then why did Reggie give it to me? No answer. Why can't you just take it? His eyes fixed on mine. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he said, "You'll find your circumstances changing." His tone was completely calm. Have a pleasant night. He turned, walked toward the BMW, got inside, drove away. I slammed the door shut, locked it, then stood there listening to my own breathing. I barely slept. I stayed in bed with the charm under my pillow. Every small noise made me sit up. Eventually, exhaustion won. Morning came, sunlight, garbage truck, cars, normal neighborhood sounds. Across the street, police tape covered Reggie's property. Real police officers moved around outside. I watched from my window. Part of me wanted to go over and tell them everything. Another part remembered Sable calling himself a detective. I didn't know who I could trust. So I stayed home. I thought maybe the worst was over. Then I checked the mail. There was an envelope from my landlord. Eviction notice. I laughed when I first read it. Not because it was funny, because it made no sense. According to the notice, I had failed to pay rent. I had paid. On time. I knew I had. I checked my banking app. The transaction was gone. Not reversed, not declined. Gone, I checked email. No confirmation. I checked old messages. Nothing. It was like I had never paid. Then, Sable's words came back. You'll find your circumstances changing. That was when I understood what he meant. He didn't need to break into my house. He could remove the thing protecting me. If the charm worked through some kind of threshold, maybe forcing me out would solve the problem. 2 days. That was how long the notice gave me. I called my landlord. He insisted payment never arrived. I argued. He told me to prove it. I had nothing. I hung up. Then I crossed the street. I know I shouldn't have. Reggie's house still had police tape around it. But something bothered me. The front door. I had watched Sable shoot the lock. I knew I had. Yet when I stood near the sidewalk, the doorknob looked intact. No bullet damage. No shattered wood. Nothing. I moved closer. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the darkness confused me. Then I saw smoke through the front window. A thin curl coming from the coffee table. A joint. Burning. Still burning. That was impossible. Reggie had supposedly died the previous night. No joint stays lit that long. I stepped toward the window. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. You were told not to look away. I stopped. Another message appeared. Truth seekers require access. Then, protection is temporary. I took screenshots. My hands were shaking badly. Then, movement appeared upstairs. A silhouette behind the curtain. Long hair. Thin shoulders. Reggie, at least. It looked like him. I whispered his name. The figure disappeared. I almost crossed the yard. Then I remembered his instructions. Stay inside. Stay quiet. Keep the charm. I went back home. For the first time, I examined the charm properly. The dark thread wasn't random. It formed patterns. Tiny knots, layered over each other. The little white pieces were definitely bone or shell. The hard object in the center looked like a tooth. I couldn't tell whether it came from an animal. The white powder around the thread was salt. There was dried plant material, too. Then I noticed something folded inside. A tiny strip of paper. I pulled it out. 3 words. Do not invite. I stared at them. Then everything clicked. Can I come in? Sable had asked more than once. He needed permission. Or whatever he really was needed permission. That was why he had broken into Reggie's house, but wouldn't cross my threshold. Maybe Reggie had his own protection. Maybe it had failed. Or maybe Reggie intentionally let him in. I had no idea. Another message arrived. Vacate voluntarily. Then another. The structure no longer recognizes you. That one scared me more than anything else. I checked the locks. Everything still seemed normal. Then someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. "Hey, my landlord's voice. We need to talk." I moved toward the peephole. He stood outside. Same face, same clothes. Almost, then I noticed his hands. Black leather gloves. My landlord didn't wear gloves, especially not in warm weather. "Open up." I stayed silent. "Knock, knock, knock. You're being unreasonable." His voice sounded almost right. Then, for 1 second, it dropped lower. "Flat. Your circumstances have changed." The charm became warm against my chest. I backed away. The person outside stopped knocking. I heard footsteps. Then, nothing. When I checked the window a few minutes later, nobody was there. No car. No landlord. Nothing. That was when I decided to leave for my sister's apartment. She lives in the city. I told her I was having a dispute with my landlord and needed somewhere to stay temporarily. I didn't tell her about Reggie, or Sable, or the deep web server. I didn't want to drag her into something I barely understood. I packed only what mattered. Laptop, clothes, documents, chargers, cash, the charm never left my body. Before I finished packing, I checked the screenshot from the server again. Something had changed. The original assignment was still there. Same wording. Same location removed from this version. But beneath the message was another line. I was certain it hadn't existed before. Secondary subject identified. Below it, my full name, not my screen name, not an email address, my real name. Then, status, aware. I sat there, staring at it. That was when the fear became something else. They knew who I was. Not because I contacted police. Not because I posted anything publicly. They knew because I looked. Reggie's words returned. Truth seekers see things. Cool things. Fucked things. You can't look away. Maybe he hadn't been encouraging me. Maybe he had been preparing me. I looked across the street one final time before leaving. Reggie's porch light was on. Someone sat in his usual chair. Long gray hair. Loose shirt. The figure raised one hand. For a moment, I thought it was waving. Then the finger touched the center of its forehead. Third eye. I blinked. The chair was empty. Maybe grief made me see it. Maybe I had smoked too much over the years. Maybe stress was finally breaking something in my brain. I wanted to believe that. Then the charm grew warm again. I heard car doors outside. Several. I moved toward the upstairs window. 3 black vehicles had parked along the street. Men and women in dark suits stepped out. None of them walked toward the house. They simply took positions around the property. Waiting, that frightened me more than if they had rushed the door. They didn't need to force their way in. The eviction deadline ended the following day. Maybe the threshold only protected me while the house was legally mine. Maybe these people had learned to work around whatever rules controlled them. They didn't break protections. They changed circumstances. That's what Sable had promised. If my home protected me, they would make it stop being my home. If money protected me, they would erase the payment. If evidence protected me, they would change the record. Rules, documents, ownership, permission, things I had always considered human systems, suddenly seemed much older, more important. Maybe we didn't invent those ideas. Maybe we just gave legal names to rules that had always existed. I left through the back. I kept the lights off. My bag over one shoulder. Charm around my neck. Phone in my pocket. I crossed the yard quietly. Nobody followed, at least not immediately. I reached my car. started driving. I didn't look back until the neighborhood disappeared behind me. I'm writing this from my sister's apartment now. I haven't told her everything. Not yet. I told her enough to make sure she doesn't invite anyone inside unless she knows them personally. She thinks I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But something happened about an hour after I arrived. Someone buzzed the apartment. My sister pressed the intercom. "Hello?" A man answered. "Detective Sable." My entire body went cold. My sister looked at me. "What?" I grabbed her wrist before she could press the entry button. The voice continued, "I need to speak with your guest." My sister looked confused. I shook my head. "No," she frowned. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Sable spoke again through the intercom. "Can I come up?" I almost laughed. Same question. Different building. Same rule. My sister looked at me. I whispered, "Don't invite him." Sable waited. Then the intercom crackled. "You will find your circumstances changing." The line went dead. 10 minutes later, my sister received an email. Her rent payment had been rejected. I stared at the screen. She looked at me. "What the fuck is happening?" I finally told her everything. Not every detail, but enough. Reggie, the server. The charm. Sable. She didn't believe me at first. Then, she saw the charm. The moment she touched it, she pulled her hand away. "It's warm." "Yeah." "What is it?" "I don't know." We checked the tiny paper again. "Do not invite." She stopped arguing after that. Now we are both sitting in her living room. Every door locked. Curtains closed. The charm between us. I've been trying to find more information about the organization. The original server is gone. Dead link. Nothing archived. No cached pages. No record that it existed. But I found references. Not clear ones. Old forum posts. People talking about men in dark suits who couldn't enter certain houses. A deleted thread describing something called subversive subjects. One post claimed that certain people could recognize what they called false citizens. Another said there are agencies that do not work for governments. They work around governments. I don't know whether any of those posts are connected. Most are probably nonsense. But now I take nonsense more seriously. I also found one sentence repeated in 3 separate archives. Awareness is contamination. That word again. Contaminated, Sable didn't mean the charm would make me sick. The charm carried awareness. Or protected it. Maybe that's what they fear. People who see. People who understand enough to notice what isn't human. Maybe Reggie gave me the charm because he knew I would become aware eventually. Maybe he had been watching me for years. Maybe he recognized something in me. Truth seeker. I used to think he was complimenting me. Now I wonder if it was a diagnosis. I don't know if Reggie is actually dead. Police reports say he is. But the details keep changing. One article said he died from a gunshot. Then later, that line disappeared. Another said natural causes. Now I can't find the article at all. His name has started disappearing from neighborhood records. A public property website lists his house as vacant for 11 years. That is impossible. I smoked weed on that porch last week. I have photos from his birthday. At least, I thought I did. They're gone. Every picture containing Reggie is corrupted. Black squares, missing files. One image still opens. It shows his porch. 2 chairs. Mine occupied. His empty. Except I remember him sitting beside me when I took it. That scares me more than anything. What if that is how these people eliminate someone? Not just killing them. Removing the circumstances that prove they existed. Maybe Reggie isn't dead. Maybe he was erased. If they can do that, I understand why he was afraid. I understand why he made charms. Why he talked about seeing. Why he told me never to look away. Someone buzzed the apartment again while I was writing this. We ignored it. Then came a knock on the door. Impossible, nobody should have been allowed upstairs. My sister and I stared at each other. 3 knocks. Slow, then Reggie's voice. Dude, my chest tightened. Open up. My sister looked at me. I almost moved. Then the charm became burning hot. I stopped. Reggie's voice came again. Come on, man, it's me. My eyes filled with tears. I wanted it to be him. God, I wanted it to be him. Then he said something Reggie would never say. Invite me in. I backed away. The voice stopped. A few seconds later, Sable spoke from the other side. You are learning. I didn't answer. Then, good. Footsteps moved down the hallway. My sister started crying. I don't blame her. I've ruined her life just by coming here. That might be what they wanted. Isolation. If every person who shelters me becomes a target, eventually nobody will let me stay. Eventually, every threshold will close. Then I'll be outside. Unprotected. Maybe that's why they don't need to rush. They can wait. Circumstances change. Relationships break. Money disappears. Records change. Homes stop being homes. Eventually, everyone becomes accessible. I keep thinking about the original message. Subversive type subject. I assumed Reggie was the target. But what if subversive doesn't mean criminal? What if it means someone capable of resisting whatever these things are? Someone who knows the rules. Someone who makes charms. Someone who teaches other people to see. That would explain why Reggie had to go. And now I'm classified as aware. Maybe I'm next because he passed something to me. Not the charm. Knowledge, if so, then hiding won't solve anything. Neither will going to the police. I have to understand the rules. Who are Sable, Slate, and Jet? What is head office? What counts as contamination? Why do thresholds matter? Why can't they enter without permission? And what exactly did Reggie put inside this charm? I opened the thread around it earlier. Just a little. My sister begged me not to. Inside the charm, beneath the tooth and salt, there is something else. A tiny piece of mirrored glass. One side is normal, the other is black. When I looked into the black side, I saw my own reflection. But there was another eye in the center of my forehead. Open, watching, I dropped it immediately. The mirror cracked. Something outside the apartment screamed. Not Sable, not human. The scream went on for almost 30 seconds, then stopped. My sister and I haven't moved since. I think Reggie was right. I think I finally opened my third eye. And I wish more than anything that I hadn't. Because now I can see the people waiting across the street. There are 6 of them. Dark suits, still bodies, all looking toward our apartment. But behind them are things I couldn't see before. Tall shapes, thin limbs, faces that don't fit human skulls. They stand close to the agents like handlers. Or owners. Sable is down there too. He looked up at me a few minutes ago. Smiled, then pointed toward his own forehead. There is no third eye there. There's a hole. And something inside it is moving. So Reggie, if you're somehow still out there, I finally understand. You were right. I am a truth seeker. I can see more now. The only problem is that once you see the truth can see you too. For 3 years, I lived in a house about 30 minutes from the nearest town. It was the kind of place most people would probably call isolated. No nearby shops, no sidewalks, no streetlights, and barely any traffic after dark. If you needed groceries, you planned ahead. If your car broke down, you hoped your phone had enough signal to call someone. I ended up there because of an old high school friend. I hadn't spoken to him in years when he suddenly messaged me and asked if I needed a place to stay. At the time, I absolutely did. Rent everywhere else had become ridiculous, and I was barely keeping myself above water. So when he offered me a room for $300 a month, I thought there had to be some kind of catch. There was. He only had one rule. I had to tolerate whatever strange things appeared on the property. And sometimes, if he needed help dealing with them, I had to help. That's it. He didn't explain what he meant by strange things. I assumed he was talking about wildlife, maybe raccoons getting into the attic, coyotes, snakes, old plumbing, something normal. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. Calling them oddities doesn't really explain what they were. Some of the things that happened there were almost harmless. There was one floorboard that kept moving, not creaking. Moving, every few weeks, the same warped floorboard would appear in a different room. At first, I thought Anthony was messing with me. I'd noticed one plank in the hallway with a split down the center. Then a month later, the hallway would be perfectly fine, but the exact same damaged plank would be beside my bed. Same knot in the wood, same crack, same little dark stain on one corner. Then it would vanish again. Anthony never reacted much when I pointed it out. Yeah, he'd say. It does that. That was the kind of answer I eventually learned to accept. Other things were harder to ignore. There was the tall man who sometimes stood between the trees near the back field. Anthony told me never to wave at him, never to call out, never to shine a flashlight directly at his face. I listened. Then there was something Anthony called the frocking. I am not ready to explain the frocking. Maybe one day. The story I keep thinking about happened about a year after I moved in. By then, I'd become used to a certain level of weirdness. Not comfortable, just used to it. There's a difference. My housemate, who I'll call Anthony, was strange even without the supernatural stuff. He was about a year older than me. Tall and skinny. Lanky enough that whenever he leaned against the doorway, he looked like he had been folded there. He had a habit of becoming obsessed with random historical wars for weeks at a time. One month, everything was the Napoleonic Wars, then the American Civil War, then the Russo-Japanese War. He could turn any conversation into a lecture. You could ask him whether we needed milk, and somehow, 10 minutes later, he would be explaining cavalry formations. Anthony also had a dog named Pickle. Pickle was mostly normal. Mostly, he was a medium-sized mutt with tan fur and ears that stood halfway up. Friendly dog. Loved food. Loved attention. But sometimes Pickle stared at things too long. Walls, doorways, empty corners. You'd walk into a room and find him sitting completely still, staring at one specific point. If you called his name, he wouldn't react. Then after a few minutes, he'd suddenly turn and act normal again. Anthony told me not to interrupt him when he did that. He's watching. Watching what? Anthony shrugged. Whatever's there. After a year in that house, you stop asking follow-up questions. Across the road from us lived an elderly couple. Retired, quiet, friendly enough. They waved whenever they saw us. Sometimes the old woman brought over jars of preserves. The man occasionally helped Anthony with equipment. They weren't creepy. At least, I never thought they were. Every couple of months, they made a burn pile. You always knew when they'd started one. The smell reached our house before you saw the smoke. It wasn't like burning wood. It was sour. Pungent. The closest comparison I can make is old vomit mixed with wet leaves. The smell would get inside even with the windows closed. I never knew what they were burning. I didn't ask. When you live somewhere with a migrating floorboard and a man in the trees, your standards for what deserves investigation change. The neighbors want to burn something that smells like death every 2 months? Fine, not my business. This particular time, though, the gap between burns had been much longer than normal. I think almost 4 months had passed. I assumed they'd gone on vacation. They sometimes disappeared for weeks. Then one morning, the smell returned. Stronger than usual. Much stronger. It drifted through the house and sat in the back of my throat. Anthony wasn't home. Pickle was sleeping under the kitchen table. I had already opened 2 windows, but that only made things worse. Eventually, I decided I needed fresh air. And a cigarette. I smoked back then. Cheap cigarettes. The kind that taste terrible even when you're addicted to them. I grabbed the pack and stepped outside. The air wasn't much better. Smoke from across the road hung low over the property. I could see a dark column rising behind the neighbor's house. Need to buy a better brand next time I'm in town, I muttered. I lit one. That first drag in the morning always hit hardest. Burn in the throat. Nicotine rushing into your head. A brief little wave of calm. Even with the sour smell from the burn pile, it felt good. I stood near the porch for a few minutes. Nothing strange happened. No voices from the woods, no shadows moving incorrectly, no unexplained noises. Just me, smoking. I finished the cigarette and crushed it under my shoe. Then I turned toward the front door. Something moved near Anthony's car. He owned an old Mitsubishi that hadn't run properly in months. It sat near the side of the driveway, with one tire almost completely flat. At first, I thought Pickle had somehow gotten outside. Then I realized the thing crouching in front of the bumper was green. I stopped. It was small, maybe 3 feet tall, possibly less. Its skin was a dull green, slightly shiny, almost damp looking. Its ears were enormous, not cartoonishly large in a cute way. They hung all the way down to its ankles, long, thin things that dragged across the gravel. Its nose looked like a pig's snout, and its mouth was wrong, too wide. It stretched nearly from one side of its face to the other, like someone had grabbed both corners and pulled. The creature was squatting in front of the Mitsubishi, examining something near the tire. I stared. My first thought was that I was hallucinating. Second thought was that one of the house oddities had finally decided to come directly onto the driveway. Third thought was that Anthony hadn't given me instructions for this one. That worried me. Usually he gave warnings. Don't wave at the tall man. Don't feed anything that knocks from inside the walls. Don't let Pickle follow the frogs after midnight. That kind of thing. No rule for tiny green creatures. I slowly moved my hand toward the front door handle. The creature heard me. Its head turned. Its eyes widened. Then it tried to stand quickly. One of its ears wrapped around its ankle. The creature tripped. It fell forward with a wet slap against the gravel. Please don't hurt. The voice was so high-pitched that I almost laughed from pure shock. I fell backward instead. My ass hit the porch. The thing had spoken. English. Perfectly understandable English. I stared at it. It pushed itself upright. One long ear was folded underneath its arm. Please don't hurt, it repeated. I stood slowly. Okay, the creature watched me. I'm not going to hurt you. I don't know why I spoke to it like a nervous dog. Maybe because it was small. Maybe because it looked scared. I took one step closer. It didn't run. What's your name? The creature glanced toward the road, then toward the woods, then back at me. Its ears dragged across the cement as it shifted. My name, Trash. I blinked. Trash? It nodded. Are you friend? That question got me. Not because it was scary, because it sounded so sincere. I looked at this ugly little green thing with giant ears and a pig nose and suddenly felt sorry for it. Yeah, I smiled. I can be your friend. Trash relaxed. At that point, I desperately needed another cigarette. The first one hadn't done enough to prepare me for talking goblins before breakfast. I reached into my pocket. Trash's eyes followed my hand. I pulled out the pack. Is food? It pointed. No, I laughed. It's a cigarette. Trash tilted its head. Not food? Definitely not food. I put one between my lips and lit it. Trash watched the flame. Its eyes became huge. I took a drag. The creature leaned closer. I should not have done what I did next. In my defense, I had no idea what rules applied to trash. You want to try? I held the cigarette out. Trash moved faster than I expected. It snatched the cigarette from my fingers. Before I could stop it, the whole thing disappeared into its mouth. Crap, for maybe 2 seconds, nothing happened. Trash stood completely still. Then its body jerked. Its eyes bulged. It started spinning. Not slowly. Running in tiny circles around the driveway. Woo! Smoke poured from its ears. I'm serious. Both ears. Gray cigarette smoke streamed from the ends while Trash spun around, screaming in a voice like a cartoon character inhaling helium. Nasty smoke. Nasty smoke. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Trash finally spat the cigarette onto the gravel. It stomped on it repeatedly. Nasty. Yeah, I wiped tears from my eyes. I tried to warn you. Trash pointed accusingly at me. You eat nasty smoke. I don't eat it. Same. That made me laugh harder. Trash looked offended for another few seconds. Then its mouth stretched into something I eventually realized was a smile. You're a fun little guy, Trash. The creature extended one hand. 3 stubby fingers. Long thumb. I hesitated. Then shook it. Its skin was cool. Damp, slightly sticky. Not unpleasant exactly. Just strange. Nice to meet you. Trash pumped my hand enthusiastically. Friend? Yeah, friend. Okay, buddy. For a brief moment, I forgot where I lived. Forgot the weird house. Forgot the things in the woods. I was standing in the driveway, making friends with a 3-foot green creature called Trash, and somehow that seemed almost wholesome. Then the gunshot happened. Crack, Trash dropped. No warning, no movement. 1 second, it was holding my hand. The next, its body hit the gravel. I screamed and stumbled backward. A small hole had appeared in the side of its head. Something white slowly pushed out. Not blood, thick white fluid. Stringy, almost creamy. It ran down the green skin. I looked across the road. The old man was walking toward us. The neighbor. He carried a rifle. He was whistling. Actually, whistling. Some cheerful tune I didn't recognize. What the fuck? My voice barely worked. He smiled. Thanks for finding this sucker. I stared at Trash. Its long ears lay across the gravel. One hand remained stretched toward where I had been standing. The old man walked over casually. When they get ripe, you've only got a couple days. I looked at him. Ripe? Yeah, he knelt beside the body. Need to harvest and cook 'em before they get like this. I couldn't understand the sentence. Every word made sense individually. Together, they didn't. Harvest? The old man didn't answer. He put the rifle down. Then, he shoved both thumbs into the bullet hole. I made a noise I don't want to describe. He pulled. Trash's skull split open. Wet crack. The sound was much louder than I expected. Inside was a white mass. It quivered. Veins ran through it. Not red veins. Cream-colored. Thick, pulsing slightly. The old man reached inside. Pinched off a piece. It stretched before tearing away. He held it toward me. A little bitter at this stage. I stared at the piece. But still good. My stomach turned. No, he shrugged. More for me. Then he put it into his mouth. Chewed, slowly, enjoying it. I heard the wet little movements between his teeth. I almost vomited. He swallowed, smiled, good protein. I couldn't speak. He grabbed Trash by one ear. The body slid across the gravel. The old man started dragging it toward the road. Wait, he stopped. I don't know why I said anything. Maybe because I still hadn't processed what happened. What was that? The old man looked down at the body. This? Yes, this, he shrugged. Trashkin, Trashkin? That's what my dad called him. He resumed dragging. I followed a few steps. You just killed it. Sure did. It talked. He looked back. So? So it talked. Lots of things talk. That sentence stayed with me. Lots of things talk. He crossed the road. I stood in the driveway watching. His wife appeared near the burn pile. She wore thick gloves and an apron. When she saw what her husband was dragging, she smiled. Found another? Neighbor boy did. She waved at me. Thank you. I didn't wave back. They carried trash behind the house. I remained outside for several minutes. Then I walked inside. Pickle was sitting in the hallway, staring at me. Not the usual long stare toward empty space. At me. I closed the door. Don't. Pickle tilted his head. I don't want whatever weird dog wisdom you're about to give me. He continued staring. I went to my room. Anthony came home later that afternoon. He found me sitting on the couch with an unopened beer in my hand. I hadn't moved much. You okay? No. He dropped his keys onto the table. What happened? I looked at him. Do you know what a trashkin is? Anthony stopped. That was not the reaction I wanted. You met Trash? You knew him? Not personally. Personally? Anthony rubbed his forehead. Shit, I stood. Your neighbors shot him. Yeah, you knew they ate those things? Anthony sighed. Yeah, and you never thought that information was important? You've lived here a year. Exactly. You're still alive. That is not the standard we're using. Pickle walked into the room. Anthony pointed at him. Pickle doesn't like Trashkin. Pickle stares at the fucking ceiling for 6 hours. Because he's responsible. I stared at Anthony. Sometimes conversations with him made me genuinely angry. What are they? He sat down. Honestly? Please, I don't know. Fantastic. The neighbors have been harvesting them longer than I've been here. Harvesting, that's what they call it. I looked toward the window. Smoke still rose across the road. Is that what they burn? Anthony nodded. The leftovers. My stomach turned. That explained the smell. Old vomit. Every few months. The burn pile. Oh, God. Yeah, what exactly are they eating? The head. I remembered the white mass. The brain? Anthony shrugged. Maybe. What do you mean, maybe? They're not mammals. How do you know? Because mammals don't hatch from garbage. I went quiet. What? Anthony looked annoyed that he had to explain. They show up in refuse piles. Trash, exactly. You named it trash because... No. Anthony shook his head. They all call themselves trash. Every one. I thought about the creature. My name, Trash. Are you friend? How many have you seen? Probably 12. I felt sick. And the neighbors killed all of them? Most? Most? Anthony looked toward the window. Sometimes they get away. What happens then? He stared at me for a second. You don't want to know. I hated when people said that. In that house, unfortunately, they were usually right. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw trash spinning around while smoke poured from its ears. Friend, then the gunshot. I kept telling myself it wasn't human. That didn't help. It spoke. It laughed. It shook my hand. It trusted me. And I'd accidentally led the neighbor directly to it. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something outside. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I sat up. Another scratch. At the window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. I slowly turned. Something green clung to the outside wall. Long ears hung downward. A wide mouth pressed against the glass. Another trashkin. It looked at me. I didn't move. Then it lifted one finger to its lips. Shh. Behind it, farther across the yard, I could see the neighbor's house. No lights, no movement. The trash can pointed toward the woods, then toward me. Then it opened its mouth. I couldn't hear through the glass. I moved closer. It repeated the words. I read its lips. Friend, come. I didn't open the window. I wish I could say I did. I wish I could pretend I was brave. But I'd already learned enough about that property to know that invitations mattered. Windows mattered. Doors mattered. Sometimes helping one thing meant letting something much worse inside. So I stood there. The trash can watched me. Then slowly climbed away. Its ears dragged along the siding. By morning, it was gone. I never told the neighbors. I did tell Anthony. He became quiet. What? I asked. Nothing, Anthony. He looked uncomfortable. Trashkin don't usually climb houses. Okay, and they don't normally come back after one gets harvested. What does that mean? He shook his head. Probably nothing. I knew better. A week later, the neighbors did another burn. The smell lasted nearly 2 days. I stayed inside. I stopped smoking on the porch for a while. Eventually, life at the house returned to what passed for normal. The floorboard migrated into the bathroom. The tall man appeared near the trees twice. Pickle spent an entire afternoon staring underneath the refrigerator. Anthony became obsessed with the Battle of Verdun and wouldn't shut up about artillery. The world continued. But I never forgot trash. I lived in that house for another 2 years. Some of the things that happened during that time were genuinely incredible. Not everything strange was evil. There were things I still miss, little moments that made the rest of the world seem boring afterward. Other memories are harder, much harder. The frocking, the thing that lived beneath the well, the night Pickle finally barked at something. The winter, when the tall man came closer than the tree line. I'm not ready to tell those stories yet. Maybe eventually. But trash was different. Trash was the first time I realized the oddities weren't just strange events happening around us. Some of them had personalities. Some could be frightened. Some could trust you. Some could call you a friend. And sometimes, the most horrifying thing on that property wasn't the impossible creature standing in front of you. Sometimes it was the completely ordinary human being walking toward it with a rifle. I don't smoke anymore. I quit years ago. But every once in a while, when I smell a cigarette burning outside, I remember trash. I remember those enormous ears, that stupid wide mouth, the way smoke poured from its ears while it screamed, nasty smoke. And for just a second, I laugh. Then, I remember the shot, the white fluid, the old man's thumb splitting open its skull, and that laughter disappears. I still don't know what Trashkin really were. Anthony never gave me a better answer. Maybe he genuinely didn't know. Maybe he did and decided there were things I was better off not understanding. But before I moved away, I saw one more. The night before I left, I was loading boxes into my car. It was close to midnight. Anthony was inside. Pickle was watching me from the porch. I heard something near the ditch. A soft little voice. Friend? I stopped. Across the road, hidden partly by tall grass, was a small green face. Long ears, wide mouth. It didn't approach. Neither did I. We stared at each other. Then it pointed toward the neighbor's house. The old couple had moved away several months earlier. Their property was empty. No burn piles, no sour smell. Nothing. The trash can looked back at me. Friend gone. I didn't know whether it meant trash. Or the neighbors. Maybe both. I'm leaving too. It seemed to understand. Its head lowered. I reached into my pocket out of habit. No cigarettes. I had already quit by then. The creature watched my hand. Food? I laughed. No. It tilted its head. Smoke? No smoke. It smiled. Good, then it disappeared into the grass. That was the last trash can I ever saw. Maybe that's why this is the story I needed to tell first. Not because it was the scariest thing that happened at that house. It wasn't. Not even close. But it was the first time I understood something Anthony seemed to have learned long before I arrived. Living around the impossible changes the way you think. Eventually, you stop asking whether something should exist. You start asking what it wants, whether it's dangerous, whether it's hungry, whether it understands you. And sometimes, if you're lucky, whether it wants to be your friend. I don't miss that house. At least, that's what I tell people. The truth is more complicated. For 3 years, I lived somewhere the rules of the world didn't seem completely finished. Some mornings, that was terrifying. Other mornings, it was beautiful. And sometimes you walked outside for a cigarette and met a little green creature named Trash. Then someone shot it in the head and ate part of its brain. That was life there. I know I'll have to tell the rest eventually. For now, this one is enough. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.